Welcome to Focus today. I really delighted to have a very special friend in the studio with us today. Ted Swartz is with us. He's a playwright and an actor, which is interesting in itself. And he's an author of a book called Laughter is Sacred Space. And we're going to talk to him about his book. There's a picture of it on the screen. And let me tell you, it's put out by Herald Press. You may want to check it out at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or check it out at Evangel as well. But he was studying to be a pastor, a Mennonite pastor, and here he is an actor. Ted, what a story.
Well, yeah.
What a journey, huh?
That's what the church thought that was supporting me.
Really?
Yeah, to be a pastor.
What happened?
I fell in love with theater. It seemed to make an awful lot of sense to me in terms of who I was as a person, and sometimes we find places that just feel like the spirits have connected and that God is really having a hand in what it is that you're doing. Had no idea that's what it was at the time. All I knew was that I felt like I was fully who I was supposed to be when I was on stage or I was working in theater. The whole aspect of acting and directing and writing just jumped out at me. I was an older student. I was 30 when I went back to college for the first time, and with 3 kids, and
wow.
Supposed to be a pastor, so after 2 years of school, to finish school, and then 3 years of seminary, I decided to be an actor.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting journey, to say the least. And now you are doing these shows.
Right.
In fact, for those who are watching today, you're going to be fast-tracking it down to Oakland because you have a show tonight.
Right. Right.
What are your shows?
Well, a number of them are based on biblical story. I started writing that while I was in seminary, monologues. And I had a creative partner for almost 20 years, and he and I would work together in trying to find where the humor was in the story. Not laying humor on making fun of something, but where's the humor that just comes out of the story itself somewhat naturally, because we're human beings and we're always going to be funny.
Yeah.
And so we were much more drawn to this idea that the first disciples of Jesus, for instance, were confused, befuddled, they didn't understand it, and there's humor in that and their confusion. So we started with not these flat figures on a page that knew the answers, because of course they didn't. I mean, Jesus was as confounding to them probably as he was to the Pharisees and the Sadducees and all the teachers of the law. But there was something about him that made them want to keep following. So we started writing theater that was based on those kinds of issues.
Before we get into some of those stories, your creative partner suffered with depression.
Yes.
And took his own life.
Yes.
Boy, what a traumatic thing to go through.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. One of the things I say in the live show is that one of the things that we do to fight grief, and grief just sneaks up on you.
Right.
You should have a period of mourning anytime something or someone passes that is close to you. And that's something you do intentionally. You spend time away, you do reading, you do reflection on those kinds of things. Sometimes it's prayer. But grief, you don't know when it's showing up.
Right.
So it just comes up and whacks you. And one of the things that I discovered is that one of the ways that you try and fight it is deny it was there in the first place. So you start convincing yourself it didn't matter that much. You start, I was angry because I was vulnerable. And that I was so, that I was hurt that much. We were as close as 2 guys can be who aren't married. Yeah. Although we spent an awful lot of time on the road, sometimes we'd say it's like a marriage. Yeah. Our spouses at home would sometimes say, this is the real spouse. Yeah. This.
Right.
So we, when he took his own life, we had set up for a show to perform the next night. So. Wow. In the midst of all of that, he was under a great deal of strain and stress, and sometimes people crack. You can only bend so far. Yeah. There went the business, because all of our inventory was dependent upon 14 hours worth of material stuffed up into your heads. Right. And when you work, as we did for many years, trying to create a brand, we went by Ted and Lee. People weren't sure who was who, but it was nice and neat. Yeah. 3 names each.
So you both were on the stage at the same time? I mean, you were both actors?
Oh yeah, we were both actors. Both actors and writers.
And writers, okay.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. So people within our community, the Mennonite community, and the larger community, we did a lot of work with youth specialties and some of the other larger youth kind of markets where people used to think that they're the only ones that need to be creative. But So when he passed away, it was the death of a brand. So it was not just losing the business, not just losing inventory, but losing my best friend. So all at the same time.
And you knew he suffered from depression.
Right.
But denial suppressed it.
I'm not an expert,
yeah.
But those who suffer from bipolar illness, the ones that I still know, are saying that you need to see someone every day and stay on your medication, or see someone every week, talk to someone in the professional field. It was an open thing for, and like many people who suffer, there's ups and downs, there's times that you're on a plateau. Lee was very frustrated many times with the fact that it dulled his personality.
I just find the correlation so interesting, because here you are writing and basically dealing with humor from a biblical perspective, and yet something deep down inside's not right.
Right. Yeah, that's the paradox. I think it's that way for many people. Lee was tremendously effective as an actor. He was a brilliant actor. And a wonderful writer, and a huge-hearted man who searched for God on a daily basis.
How'd you wrestle that with your faith?
I believe that we are all on a continuum of a journey toward God, and there are those who will stumble and those who will fall. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to equate Lee's illness with a fall, because it wasn't truly an illness.
Right.
That's the difficulty with mental health, or mental illnesses sometimes, is that we equate it with some sort of spiritual failing when it's not. It's an illness. It's like having a broken leg. It's like having a broken arm. It's not visible, and we also want people to, take care of yourself, pick up, feel better, and it's an impossibility.
You say laughter is a sacred space. What do you mean by that?
Well, the original title in the book, it says laughter in sacred space, which implies that working with biblical story and working within ministry, those are sacred spaces, working within the Bible. Right. Those stories, as we understand them, that's a sacred space. So to find the laughter in that, but then as I live my life with it, I believe that laughter is so it's scribbled out and written is instead of in, so that. Lee and I had a saying that we used, I think it started with him, is laughter is a sign that we can never be too far away from the love of God. And so laughter is a way that we connect to each other. Laughter can be cruel, obviously we all know that. And jokes have a certain common denominator that we wince at sometimes. But when we laugh together, especially communally, something happens that doesn't happen in any other way. When you laugh, you open yourself up. And when you open yourself up, you open yourself for the possibility of grace, the possibility of God's love in a way that you don't expect. For me, it was always a matter of, laughter was so crucial because it was about getting people to like me. My personality type is that, and it's part of what makes me a good actor, I've been told, is that I desperately want you to like me when I walk out on stage. So and one of the ways I do that is to get you to laugh. And now we've got a connection that we can't find any other way. It's like a shortcut to I call it a societal lubricant. It makes things a little bit easier to get through between people. And if you think about how many times you laugh in a day and sort of mark down why, what made it do that? Why did I laugh at that? Was it really funny, or did I just want to make that person feel connected to me?
Are you using laughter as acceptance?
Acceptance of
people accepting you?
Oh gosh, yes. Okay. If I can make you laugh, that says something to me that it also allows you to talk about difficult issues. When we started writing theater based on biblical story, we thought people would really be upset because, okay, what's laughter in the Bible? What's funny about the disciples? What's funny about the Apostle Paul? He's a pretty stern man. What's funny about all of those things? What we discovered is that people wanted to see them as human beings. And when you laugh at something that it confounds you, it allows us to connect to those stories in a way that nothing else can. So.
It seems so interesting because going to seminary is pretty serious stuff. I mean, you're in there. I remember my first day in Bible college, and I was in this class of Pentateuch, and I realized man, I am so in over my head. What in the world am I doing in this class?
The trick to remember is everybody's in over their head.
Yeah.
So.
And I'm sitting in there, and this professor's up there laying out all this first 5 books of the Bible, and I'm going, oh man, what did I do here? You know, you feel the call to be there.
Yeah.
But you thought, man, there's no way I'm going to get through this.
Right.
You know, and then all of a sudden you realize the reality of academics and faith. I mean, whoa.
It's interesting. Well, the first words of the of the book are 37%, and it has to do with my final test score in Greek exegesis. I got a 37. Yeah, it's
and you stuck with
out
it?
of 100. Well,
Yeah.
that was the year that I went to the dean of the seminary and said, "How about if I go to the state university across town and take their acting program? And will you give me seminary credit?" And to his credit, he said yes. So that started another, because I went to a small Mennonite school, and it's a small pond.
Yeah.
So I might have been a good actor in that pond, but can I go be a good actor someplace else? It was important for me to find out. So I went over there and got kicked around a little bit and was given roles that the professor was pretty sure would allow him to see whether or not I was serious about this.
Wow.
So,
Now, you married for a young, and yet you felt called to the ministry later on.
yeah, I was 19 when I got married, 2 years out of high school. It seemed like a lot of us in that community were doing that thing where a lot of family businesses in that semi-rural community in eastern Pennsylvania, in the Mennonite community there. My girlfriend, later my wife, went to college for 2 years. Then we got married. Then we stayed out for 3, and then she went back to school, and I just worked construction. And then at 25, I started coaching basketball and baseball at the high school level, and became youth leaders. We became youth leaders at our church, and it was that kind of, in those kind of leadership settings, that people were making a discernment. And I always felt like that there was something else I should be doing or could be doing, and a call toward. It was kind of fuzzy, but sometimes we get a pull toward a call, and some of it is to serve. It's not about, gosh, there's something I'm supposed to be because it's going to influence lives. That's kind of a residual thing. I think it's a call to serve, and that was kind of there. Then a couple came to me at church one time and said, "We think maybe you should go to seminary. We'd like to pay for your way."
No kidding.
Housing and tuition for 5 years.
No kidding.
And with the idea that I would become a Mennonite pastor, not necessarily with that congregation, but somewhere, sort of a service to their service to the greater church. And it made sense. I was in a family business that had closed the year before. I was a meat cutter till I was 29. And so we went, and that first fall I had my first acting class and fell in love with that, and started this consternation for me in terms of, I felt like I was called to serve. I had no idea that it would have its way through that avenue. Now I find myself speaking. My dad's pretty happy about, okay, finally you're doing what you're supposed to do. He wanted somebody in the family to be a preacher. And so it's kind of interesting coming full circle. Somebody from that congregation back in Pennsylvania had a big chuckle because that our denomination has a number of pastors, leadership conferences, conventions to do and to study. So the one in Virginia, where I was 400 or 500 pastors and leaders would come, and I had the final plenary. I was the final speaker.
Really?
So they were having a big chuckle back home. So, okay, so he never did become a preacher. Now he's talking to preachers. So anyway.
So share with us something you do. I mean, you know.
Well, one of my favorite pieces is, and I don't have my props with me. And what I usually wear is one of those woolen toboggans, they call them in some parts of the country, with little tassels that hang down.
Right.
20 years ago, they were a lot less common, and they were pretty funny. And then I put one of those on, and I sometimes say that my IQ drops about 60 points as soon as I put the hat on. And Jeremiah 13 is an interesting text that we think we know who Jeremiah was.
He was a bullfrog, wasn't he?
Well, very good, very good. At the beginning of the talk, I come out and I use a Southern dialect, and I say something like, "Howdy, my name's Jeremiah. So a few years ago, the Lord said to me, Jeremiah, go buy some shorts and wear these shorts, but don't wash them." That's what he said. So that's what I did. I went up on some shorts and I wore them, but I didn't worship. I was never that popular anyway. It's a few years later the Lord said, now take them shorts off and go over there to Pyre and hide them shorts in a crack in the big rock. Well, that's what he said, so that's what I did. I went over there to Pyre and I hid them shorts in a crack in the big rock. First off, I took them off. Ooh. A few years later, the Lord said to me, go back there to Pyre and get them shorts in the crack in the big rock. That's what I did. I went over and I got them. Now I pulled out this astoundingly ragged pair of underwear out of my pocket and say, the Lord said, they didn't look the same. I was pretty sure they wouldn't. And the Lord said, I will use the power of Babylonia to destroy the pride of Judah and Jerusalem. They do evil things. They even worship other gods. And when I am done with them, they will be good for nothing. Just like them shorts. So this is, and people would say to me after a show, all right, now that's not in the Bible, right? Yeah. It's Jeremiah 13. It's almost verbatim. It's this Jeremiah, at the end of one of the scenes, he says, well, it's hell being a walking metaphor. And that's kind of really what it feels like, that Jeremiah, God made him do these amazing and astounding, difficult things. Lie on your side for 7 years. Right. You know, wear these underwear for years and don't wash them. And I mean that. So you can see the metaphor at this point, but in the middle of it, that must have been tough. You know,
you mentioned earlier the calling of the disciples, because all of that is so interesting to me. I think when you go through seminary and Bible college, and I remember we made everything so serious, and it is serious, but what happens is you spill over, you kind of, I don't know if you spill over, but you walk over the top of the fact that these people had personalities. Sure. I mean, they were human beings. I mean, they had good days and bad days, and yet there was something about the calling of the disciples, wasn't there?
Yeah, there was.
I mean, they just dropped everything and followed it. Yeah. I mean, how do you
one of the things
work on that?
One of the things we did for the show that Lee and I wrote together, called Fish Eyes, which is the story of the disciples. We start barefoot fishing, coming back from fishing, and they meet this guy who says, "Go out and cast your nets again." And they basically said, "Okay, who are the fishermen here?" Yeah. And they refused to go, my character especially. Yeah. And then Andrew, the character that Lee played, we played him as a bit more with someone who was accustomed to wonder, accustomed to mystery, accustomed to stepping out when it didn't feel like there was a tangible reason. But we kept saying, there's something about him that compelled us to go. We don't say what it is, but what that something is a mystery that calls us forward. So Peter, my character, we think we know who Peter was, because he was impulsive and he was rash and he was loud and he said stupid things all the time. Yeah. And Andrew basically convinces him to go. And they end up at a wedding. So we end up getting dressed, putting our shoes and socks on, they end up at this wedding. And at one point they're going down the receiving line and they're introducing themselves to the parents. "Hi there. Nice to see you. You must be the mother of the bride." "Yes, I'm Peter. It's my brother Andrew." Yeah. It's this new group we're in. It's kind of a gathering of, what are we going to be doing? Oh, excellent question. What are we going to be doing? And all they can come up with is, "We're with Jesus."
Yeah, we're with Jesus.
And that's to me, that's in a nutshell the show.
Wow.
We don't know what we're going to be doing, but we're with Jesus. He's going to let us know what our next steps might be. He's going to let us know. And
what a story.
That carries through the whole piece. And the feeding of the 5,000 was sort of the signature piece that was the first one written many years ago. And it's, they're standing there watching him teach again. And how long's he been talking? 3 days. Oh, he's killing me. I mean, and so then he tells them to, go find some food. And they go out and they're disgruntled. I mean, we're disciples, right? We're not in the catering.
Right.
And they go out there and they what's fun in the show that we had done, and I still do it solo, is we literally go into the audience at a show and collect food. Really? And you end up with mints. We got a wooden apple one time, all sorts of candy bars, and then we report in to Jesus. "What do you have?" "Well, we got 5 loaves of bread, 2 fish, and a pack of Skittles." And occasionally there's something that Jesus, where we say, "Well, it's a chocolate bar, something like that, Snickers, and then we say, no, Jesus, there's no nuts in it.
Yeah.
So it puts them in a human context. But what doesn't change is the people would say, well, you're fooling with the story, and I said, no, the story stays the same.
Right.
They still go collect food. They still come up with almost nothing. They still are able to feed the 5,000. They are still filled with wonder. And then he tells them to go get in the boat and go across the lake, and I'll catch up.
Yeah. Wow.
You know, so
wow.
It ends with one of my favorite scenes with is that particular show ends with John 21, Breakfast on the Shore. That arc of Jesus has been killed. They don't know he's been resurrected. They're in distress. They feel betrayed. They're angered. They're afraid. Peter's denied right after he said he wouldn't.
Right.
Oh my gosh, how human is that?
Yeah.
And they end up and they say, well, let's go fishing.
Yeah.
Because that's the only thing we know anymore.
Yeah.
So they go fishing. I have a talk that I give based on some of my experiences. And I just discovered that when life does something like what happened to me, where my partner took his own life, I did what I knew, which is I went back to fishing. I went back to writing. I went back to performing. And you're not whole. You're never going to be whole in quite the same way.
Right.
But it changes you. Sometimes it's for the better, ultimately, because I think the cliches of that you cannot know someone else's grief with true empathy until you felt it yourself.
Yeah.
And it's one of the things that makes a good actor, or you have to have empathy to be an actor.
Right.
And now I know better.
Wow.
So.
Well, the book is entitled Laughter is Sacred Space, a not so typical journey of a Mennonite actor. And
still Mennonite. So.
Still Mennonite. Ted Swartz, who is a Mennonite, I guess, went on to Bible college and to seminary, Mennonite seminarian, and then turned actor. And God is using him in a mighty way. And sometime, hopefully, when you're in this area, which is a very artsy area,
yeah,
it would be. I think you would do well in here. We need to see this.
I would love to come back. You just hop on the website and bring me in. Okay. It'd be interesting if the TV show would to sponsor an event. We did shows here many years ago. In the 90s, we were here at a church, and I was trying to pull up my details of which church. I can remember the last name of the associate pastor. His name was McCullough. And I know we were near, I think we were near the Rogue River for the hotel, and we had some wonderful shows.
Oh, that's great.
And we went to see Crater Lake, and I have some great pictures and memories of that time. We had an extra day, and they took us, they treated us well. And I wish I could remember the name of the church.
Well, Ted, you're a delight.
Thank you.
Thank you for what you do. Thank you for your faithfulness, and hopefully sometime we can get your show back in the area.
Love to.
And drive carefully on your way to Oakland tonight. And many blessings to you.
Thanks, Perry.
Okay.